Well, what we should know at the moment is that the Canadian military has confirmed that one of its CH-148 Cyclone helicopters, one of the brand new helicopters that have been replacing the Sea Kings over the last few years, has been involved in an incident. They won't say that it's crashed, but they're saying that there's a developing incident taking place. What we are being told from local media in Greece and in the area is that a helicopter has indeed crashed. They named the helicopters coming from HMCS Fredericton. Now, Fredericton has been taking part in Operation Reassurance, which is the NATO mission to deter Russian aggression. And it was operating in an area between Greece and Italy. And we are told that the crash may have taken place in the Ionian Sea in international waters, and at about 80 kilometers off of the resort island of, I believe it's Kefalonia.
Yeah, correct, Kefalonia. What more can you tell us about, I know there are just early reports, we have no confirmation, but that there were, I think it's up to 6 people on board?
Yes, that's right. Well, I mean, a Cyclone helicopter has 4 crew members for the most part, depending upon the mission that it's on. And since they were taking part in a NATO mission, the principal use of the Cyclone helicopter is for anti-submarine warfare. So they could have been conducting some kind of nighttime exercise or early evening exercise when the incident took place. What we can also say is that there was some initial confusion about what kind of helicopter was involved and whether or not it was indeed Canadian, because we were getting conflicting reports coming out of the various media in that part of the world. Originally, it had been said that it was a Sea King helicopter that had crashed, and there's only one Navy right now that is still flying a Sea King helicopter, and that is the German Navy. And the Germans have a replenishment ship that is part of this NATO task group. So there was some initial confusion there that that's now been cleared up by the Canadian Defense Department.
And what about I understand at least there is some sort of search and rescue mission underway. The reports so far coming out of local media in Greece say that it's other NATO ships are conducting one. What might that look like?
Well, it would be difficult at the moment because it would be a nighttime operation. So they would have to have at least some of their helicopters, perhaps in the air, some of from the other naval ships, and they would have to be sweeping the area. Now, there is at least one report that the fuselage has been found, but that's definitely not been confirmed at the moment. But the conditions there would be rather difficult. The weather forecast in the area today, the Vashi was very good. The seas were reasonably calm, so that should help in the effort to locate the helicopter.
And what is Canada's contribution right now to, or level of involvement with Operation Reassurance?
Well, Canada is contributing a variety of assets to Operation Reassurance, principally from the naval standpoint. They have been, Canada's regularly been contributing a frigate to this standing task group. NATO has 2 task groups working in various parts of one in the north and one in the Mediterranean. Canada has routinely been part of the NATO Task Group 2. In fact, the Fredericton was just recently in the Black Sea, taking part in operations that were there. So it's a long-standing deployment. I think one of the things, though, that needs to be asked is if indeed a Cyclone helicopter has gone down. There's going to be a lot of questions because the Cyclone is a new helicopter, and there have been it's been a very long time the Canadian Air Force has waited for the Cyclone, and I'm sure there's going to be some pretty hard questions to ask. But at the moment, it's a search and rescue operation, and there's hope that no one has been injured, but it's unclear right now what the condition of the crew might be.
And what do we know about you talk about the Cyclone? How does it handle water? Are there certain specific things about it that might lend itself to this kind of situation?
Well, I mean, the Cyclone is a maritime helicopter, and one of the reasons it took so long to introduce it into the Canadian military was because it was a civilian helicopter built by Sikorsky, but it had to be militarized. It had to be hardened, is the term that a lot of the military folks use, and it had to be made more rugged for military operations, and that's why it took almost 12 years to properly develop the helicopter, and it's been introduced slowly into the service in the Canadian military because not all of the software was complete. Now, these most military aircraft today are like flying iPods, and they will be operated mostly by their software. And some of the software that is operating on the Cyclone had to be introduced slowly, and that's been part of the problem. But I'd like to also point out that Canada is not necessarily the only one that has faced these kinds of problems introducing these new high-tech helicopters, because the Germans have been trying to replace their Sea Kings for maritime operations for a long time with the NH-90, and it's been just as difficult. So, but there are a lot of questions that will probably be asked if indeed this Cyclone helicopter has gone down.
And just one last question for you, Marie, before I let you go into recap for our viewers who might just be joining us right now. There are initial early reports that a Canadian NATO helicopter has gone missing in the sea off the coast of Greece, between Greece and Italy. You can see a map there in front of you. The Canadian Armed Forces has confirmed that they lost contact with the helicopter, but they have not confirmed whether or not, they don't know at this point, they're saying, Canadians were on board. Murray, pardon my ignorance, is there, in a NATO operation like this, because it's a Canadian helicopter, does that mean that Canadians necessarily are part of the crew, or does it, because it's a NATO operation, that could vary?
Well, it could vary because there are reports, and most of the reports that we're getting that it is a Canadian helicopter that has gone down are coming from local media in Greece. And while the Canadian Defense Department has confirmed that there has been an incident and there's a developing situation regarding one of their helicopters, it has yet to confirm that the helicopter has gone down. Mm-hmm. So a Cyclone would have up to 4 Canadian crew members on board. Now, if indeed there were 6, as local media reports suggest, then it could be transporting other members of the NATO task force. We have no idea right now what kind of mission that it was on. Was it training? Was it training for anti-submarine warfare? Or was it simply doing what would be considered to be a milk run between the various ships? So those are questions that are still going to have to be answered.
Okay, I'll leave it there, Marie, and I hope you don't mind. We'll keep checking in with you throughout the next hour if there are any updates. Really appreciate your time and your insights on this.
Happy to talk to you.
I want to bring in Dave Perry right now. Dave, are you there?
Yes.
Hi, you can hear me. Thanks so much.
I can.
Appreciate you joining us tonight. I just wanted to get your reaction to those initial reports. Of course, the Canadian military has confirmed that they lost communication. They have not released any details, for example, of a crash happening, or other than we know that there's a search and rescue mission underway right now. Your initial impression?
Well, initially thoughts with the crew and their family, and hopefully the search and rescue mission is successful. There's lots of different things that can happen to a helicopter like that. So hopefully this is something where the pilot was able to put it down in a controlled fashion and there's a communications issue or something, and they can find that crew as soon as possible.
What can you tell us about the helicopter itself? What should we know, for those of us who are not super familiar with the various types of helicopters, about the Cyclone?
So this is one that was purpose-built basically for the Canadian Air Force to go and work abroad on our warships. So it's marinized. It's specifically built to operate in and around salt water. And then the types of jobs that it does flying off the back of one of our frigates are fairly demanding. Landing on the back of one of those ships that aren't very big is pretty difficult to do. And Canada's really developed a lot of technology and procedures that have put it kind of at the forefront of militaries for several decades in operating those helicopters. And they operate them to kind of do 2 chunks of different activities. The first is to basically try and help the ship fight when it's at sea by going up in the air and being able to detect other warships or other submarines, and then relaying that information to the other ships that it's sailing with. And then it does a number of different functions that are like a lot of different helicopters can do. It can be used for transport of either goods or people. It can contribute in search and rescue scenarios itself, and provide a lot of basically just kind of general utility type functions.
If you're just joining us now, I'm joined by Dave Perry. He's Vice President with the Canadian Global Affairs Institute. We're talking about reports primarily from local media in Greece of a Canadian NATO helicopter, which they say crashed. We know from the Canadian Armed Forces that communication with the helicopter has been lost. There are reports as well of up to 6 people on board. We have no idea if any of them are Canadian. I want to read briefly before I go back to Dave the statement from the Canadian Armed Forces, which says there is a developing situation regarding one of our helicopters deployed on board HMCS Fredericton, which is currently contributing to Operation Reassurance. Contact was lost with the aircraft as it was participating in Allied exercises off the coast of Greece. Search and rescue efforts are currently underway. As this is evolving, we have no further information to provide at this time. Dave, Operation Reassurance, what can you tell us about that operation and the Canadian contribution to it?
So Operation Reassurance is a multi-year NATO mission to basically try and bolster Allied solidarity in the face of Russian activity that started in their invasion of Crimea. So it's basically been done several different initiatives. Part of what we've got troops on the ground in Eastern Europe. We've sent planes to support these types of missions. And then the maritime component of it has basically been to send additional ships to participate with our allies sailing within NATO's area of operation. So basically to have a presence out on the water and on the seas, and to make sure that the Russians in particular know that we're there, know that we're training, and know that we are prepared to help other NATO allies should we need to.
Allied exercises is what the statement says, the aircraft as it was participating in Allied exercises off the coast of Greece. What might that encompass?
It could range to include a whole number of things. All at kind of the higher end, and something that would be using sort of the full set of equipment and mission profile that helicopter has. It could have been doing something like an anti-submarine warfare exercise, which is really kind of the main, the raison d'etre for that particular helicopter, which has it's important to keep in mind that it's very new, so it's got one of the most modern sets of anti-submarine warfare equipment amongst the entire NATO alliance on those Canadian Cyclones. So it could be doing an exercise like that, practicing how you would go through the process of hunting for an enemy submarine. Could have also been doing various different things, just in terms of ship maneuvering. Sometimes a helicopter can be used to provide an enhanced surveillance perspective for the ship, because it can go up and actually physically see things directly that a ship can't see at a greater distance, or could have been moving people back and forth between ships. There's a whole bunch of different things that this could entail.
The early reports coming from local media in Greece say that there were up to 6 people on board. Obviously, as I mentioned, we don't know. We have no confirmation if they are Canadians or otherwise. How does staffing these normally work, though? How does it work when it comes to the crew?
So the normal complement is basically 4. You have pilot and a co-pilot up front, a tactical operator, and then basically a sensor operator. So that's the 2 people to basically fly and operate the physical helicopter, another person to operate the computer essentially, and then someone else that could be doing things like help hoisting people up off either a ship's deck or out of the water, as an example. And then depending on the configuration, it can take up to almost a couple of dozen passengers. And it could have another couple of people if it was even doing something simple like transporting an officer between one ship and another ship. That could explain why it had another couple of people on board, but not that many.
My colleague Murray Brewster, who you know well, I know was on a few minutes ago, and I was asking him about the search and rescue mission that we know is underway, and he pointed out it wouldn't be an easy one, of course, because it's night, it's the middle of the night there. What can you tell us about what you'd imagine that search and rescue mission will entail?
I think it would be an all hands on deck kind of exercise. I think, one, if there is any kind of silver lining here, going down in that part of the world, compared to say like the North Atlantic off the coast of Halifax or something, it's better to be going down in those waters for a couple of reasons. They're warmer. It's a higher traffic area depending on exactly where it was. So there's potentially more available resources that can go and help for that. But I imagine that both the other ships directly that it is sailing with, as well as the other NATO assets, and there would be several that would be within relatively close reach, of where they were operating are all going to be converging on that area and doing their utmost to try and find that helicopter and its crew.
To recap again, if you're just joining us, reports confirmed partially by the Canadian Armed Forces that a Canadian NATO helicopter has gone missing in the sea between Italy and Greece. There is a developing situation. The statement from the CAF reads regarding one of our helicopters, which is currently contributing to Operation Reassurance. Contact was lost with the aircraft as it was participating in Allied exercises off the coast of Greece. Search and rescue efforts are currently underway. Dave, I have just about a minute before I have to move on, but I guess what are you watching for over the coming hours as far as this search and rescue mission goes?
Well, again, I mean, hopefully they find their crew and they're okay. And then beyond that would be really kind of trying to assess what happened, and that would likely take some time. These helicopters operate in pretty difficult conditions. It's one of the tougher scenarios in which to fly. Sounded like this one was at some distance from the Canadian ship, just because of the nature of what they're describing there as a loss of communication. Yeah. But there could be any number of factors, and it would potentially take some time to actually figure out exactly what it was that happened.
Okay, I'll leave it there. Thanks a lot, Dave. Really appreciate your time this evening.
Great to talk to you.
Hi, I'm Vashi Capellos, host of Power in Politics. See more of our show by subscribing to the CBC News channel or click the link for another video.